Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the NXT Podcast. I'm your host, Skelly Bones, here on the No Holds Barred Network, bringing you all the news, reviews, and more when it comes to NXT Live on the USA Network every Wednesday. And we'll start this off with a recap of the last episode, the October 16th episode of NXT. It had the opening match of Tommaso Ciampa versus Angel Garza. Of course, the return in the first match in 7 months for Tommaso Ciampa. It was a fine little squash match. In my opinion, not that great. You can hear more about that in the last episode, the NXT review. Undisputed Era gave Mauro Ranallo a USB that had a video on it showing them basically murdering the Velveteen Dream. So Dream is basically out for the foreseeable future. We then had Imperium versus Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan, which was probably the best match of the night. Really good tag match. After that, there was an Io Shirai Caden Carter match, which was fine. Keith Lee Dominic Dijakovic had another match again, which was looking to be another pretty good match, and then was interrupted by Roderick Strong, which sets up their triple threat they're going to have tomorrow. There was also Matt Riddle versus Bronson Reed in a bit of a glorified squash that Reed got to show off a little bit of his offense, and he looked pretty good. Tegan Nox returned. She took on Tainara Conti, or just Tainara. It was a okay match for a return. It should have been just a squash. Again, you can hear my more in-depth opinion on that on the review episode that was posted. Then we also had Boa versus Killian Dane, which ended up being basically a squash for Dane. Boa had some offense early, but then was basically murdered by a crossbody, and then Dane killed him with 3 Vader bombs and a submission hold. And then the main event was Damian Priest and Pete Dunne. Ended with Priest kicking Dunne in the balls, and then hitting his finish, the Reckoning, which is the roll the dice, basically. Or the Crossroads. I don't know, everybody uses this finish. It was an alright NXT. But we'll see what they have coming up on this next episode. So on the next episode of NXT, the October 23rd episode, the matches we have announced so far are the 3-way match for the North American title, featuring Dominic Dijakovic, Keith Lee, and Roderick Strong. This should be a pretty good match. I assume we're going to get either Undisputed Era shenanigans or some kind of goofball. Lee and Dijakovic are going to kill each other and Roderick's going to escape, but I was thinking we would get a title change originally, but now after sleeping on it a bit, I'm pretty sure we're not going to get a title change here, but this probably will set up the next number 1 contender and probably the next takeover match for the North American title, being it either Lee or Dijakovic. So I'm assuming that will be a pretty good match. I'm excited to see that. We also have Bianca Belair versus Rhea Ripley announced, which is basically a number 1 contenders for the NXT Women's title. So the winner of that match, I'm assuming, will face Shayna next. This should basically be Rhea's match. Again, Bianca is one of my favorite women in NXT. I think she has a lot of potential. She's super strong, very athletic, has a pretty good gimmick, and is not that bad on the mic. I mean, needs a little bit of work here and there. It just very much like Dream needs a little bit of polish, but the overall basic skills are there, and she's got a huge upside. That being said, Rhea's new and hot and pretty much I feel has the crowd behind her right now, and when it's your time, and it's her time right now to, I think, be the champion. At least have him to be the number one contender. She definitely should be the next challenger for sure. I would really like to see her be the one to dethrone Shayna. And then, honestly, it may be time for Shayna to go up to the main roster. They always know, they can always use more women that can, well, you would hope they'd be utilized properly, but they could always use more women that can be, thought of as somewhat legit. And she's definitely legit and would be interesting on the main roster, but who knows what they're going to end up doing with her if she does go up there. If she remains in NXT, she'll be fine to have a couple of matches. There's nothing wrong with her staying because that just gives us more good matches with her and Rhea, her and Bianca, her and Candice again, of course, can be a great match, I think. And I would love to see Shane and Io Shirai in NXT because I don't think Io Shirai and Shayna will be the same in NXT as if it would be if we see it on the main roster. So hopefully we get a really good women's match tomorrow night, and we'll see where these storylines go in the future. Let's see. Also for this week, there wasn't much besides those three announced, but also they have been pushing Finn's return, which I'm assuming will have a match with Finn finally. I'm assuming it'll be a squash. If not, it's probably going to be against Shane Thorne or maybe Cameron Grimes or something like that. I'm not expecting it to be much more than a glorified squash for Finn if he returns, because they're going to try and get him, back over and as hot as possible. And also online, they've been pushing Pete Dunne and Priest and Killian Dane in a bit of a three-way triangle, because if you recall, Killian Dane came out before the main event last week, and Pete Dunne snapped his fingers, sending him to the back. And then, of course, that match ended with Dunne getting kicked in the balls by Priest. And now it appears that all three men are kind of having issues with one another. We'll have a match, but we'll see if they have a bit of a dispute on this week's NXT. And, of course, finally, we're going to see what's going on with Tommaso and Adam Cole, I think. Tommaso, of course, has been coming out the last couple of weeks and looking for Goldie and announcing that he's back. And I think that after his win and his return, find a way to face-to-face with Adam Cole or figure out a way to be number one contender soon. So I think we're going to see more of Tommaso Ciampa featured heavily on this week's NXT. So that pretty much wraps it up for NXT news this week. Kind of a slow week in terms of news. Not too much going on outside of the normal angles and setup for the show. But there was some pretty interesting news that I wanted to bring to your attention if you weren't already aware. And that is the formation of New Japan Pro Wrestling of America, which is the new subsidiary of New Japan Pro Wrestling, which will be an American-based, basically second brand almost, if you will, of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Now, this next piece I'm going to read comes from the Wrestling Observer newsletter, so if you don't already, be sure to check out the Wrestling Observer newsletter written by Dave Meltzer. It's got a lot of interesting information, especially when it comes to New Japan and AAA and a lot of international wrestling. If you're not solely interested in just American wrestling, the Wrestling Observer is a great source of information. But anyways, let me get into this. At a press conference overnight, New Japan Pro Wrestling officially announced the formation of an American subsidiary. It's named New Japan Pro Wrestling of America, and it was noted that this is Phase 3 of New Japan's international business plan. Step 1 was searching for talent, while Step 2 was running shows in the United States and other countries and markets. Operations are scheduled to begin next month. A map of markets New Japan Pro Wrestling of America is focused on for events was shown at the press conference. And there's a image here showing where they will be focusing their events at. And it actually has quite a few. Basically, the West Coast, the East Coast, some spots in the Midwest, and 4 cities in Texas. You also had the leaders of New Japan saying that they were focusing on live events over television. And they're basically running 2,000-seat arenas are what they're focusing on for their level that they're going for right now. So this is another interesting turn of events. You know, you had WWE trying to buy Stardom, actually, over the weekend, I believe, trying to get what some people believe was the start of NXT Japan, and actually failing to purchase Stardom. And in return, you had New Japan's parent company, Bushiroad, buying Stardom. Then you also had the announcement of New Japan starting an American-based company, which will be based out of LA, the LA Dojo, I'm assuming. So again, just more and more changes to the wrestling universe every day, and there's always new crazy stuff happening. This, of course, is more good news if you're a wrestler, more opportunities and places for you to work and get experience. And if they're going to focus more, if New Japan is going to focus more heavily in America and having some of their better trainers and focus more resources to their LA dojos and things of that nature, it's nothing but good news for wrestlers that want to either work for New Japan or at least train with New Japan and know you're going to get a really good quality training. So we'll see how this works out in the future. Again, you have New Japan on Access right now, which was just bought by Impact, Impact's parent company. So you have Impact on Access, which is going to be featured. You have New Japan on Access, which is going to be basically a secondary show, I'm assuming. You're not going to run them head-to-head. Now you're going to also have the New Japan America, which there's going to have to be, you know, at least how New Japan does their Road to and pay-per-view shows. There's going to be some type of, you know, television or pay-per-view content being created, because that's how you make money in this day and age. So it will be interesting to see what happens going forward with this New Japan world and the whole New Japan Impact Access relationship that's going on right now. And in some other sort of weird news that was brought up this week, TNA will be making a comeback this WrestleMania weekend. Impact stating that they're going to be doing a TNA-themed show over WrestleMania weekend, which my only assumption can mean we're going to have Aces and Eights in a Fire Russo match. So this should be really fun. Normally, when you think of TNA and how much ill will they instilled over the years and all the LOL TNA memes and whatnot, and just how much Impact has kind of turned around in the last 18 months, really. It's not been that long since Callis and the company took over and kind of started to right the ship, if you will. So I think doing this kind of tongue-in-cheek sort of show. And if it's going to be just a one-off show over WrestleMania weekend, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. You do need sort of a theme or a draw, something that's going to, hook people in my opinion, because over WrestleMania weekend, there's so many options for shows to go to. I mean, everybody's running shows, and there's a lot of big names at all these different places now. So you need to do something special to stand out, and I think a TNA show, especially for people that were fans growing up and remember the good times and not all the garbage times, although there were a lot more garbage than good, especially in the latter stages of that show. But anyways, I digress. That about wraps it up for this episode of the NXT Podcast. I'm your host, Skelly Bones, with you guys every Tuesday and every Friday for reviews, and I'll be talking to you guys next Friday. Make sure you check out the No Holds Barred Network on Twitter at NHB Network. Make sure you check out our sister podcast, the All Elite Podcast at All Elite Pod. Make sure you follow both of those hosts at Real Kyle Masters and at Loves to Dream 82. Kyle and Tiff really do a great job hosting that show. And make sure you follow me, your host, Skelly Bones, at Bones_Skelly. And again, always fun. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys on Friday with the NXT Podcast.